All right, I still have more football thoughts. I mean, let's be honest, it's Tuesday of game week. A few days removed from one game, a few days ahead of another game. There's plenty to talk about there. Of course, a little bit of news and notes. This Virginia game, as you know, is an 8 p.m. kickoff this Saturday, but then Pitt Clemson is going to be a noon game on ESPN in 2 weeks. So apparently the powers that be and the TV decision makers, the kingmakers at ESPN, as it were, still think that Pitt's going to be an interesting and relevant team, and presumably assuming the Panthers will be 8-1 when they take on the Clemson Tigers in 2 weeks. So that game's going to get ESPN treatment at noon. I'm really happy about a noon game. I like noon games. I know different people have different opinions, but like this Saturday is going to be a really late one. Next Saturday will be a little bit more manageable. Either way, we'll be live after those games, the post-game shows, right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. It'll be very late this Saturday. It'll be nice and reasonable time, like 6 or 7 o'clock next Saturday after that Clemson game. That's right here at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. And of course, I still have a lot of thoughts about Pitt football in general, where the Panthers stand after Saturday's dismantling at SMU. A lot of questions, obviously, in particular about the offense, and I think some thoughts on what Pitt needs to do to fix the offense. But all of that being said, like I said, we're a few days removed from one game and a few days ahead of the next game. But in the meantime, Pitt basketball played a game. Panthers were on the court last night for the season opener against Radford, handed out a 40-point win over the Highlanders. Highlanders, who were, I think, one game under 500 last season, but typically play a very tough schedule, got a couple wins over power conference or high major teams last year. Maybe not so much of a pushover, maybe are a pushover, but either way, they were 40-point. They suffered a 40-point loss to Pitt last night at the Peterson Event Center. So while we have a lot of football to talk this week, we're not going to hide from the fact that basketball season is officially underway with Pitt's season opener last night. Let's talk about what we saw out of the Panthers in that 96-56 win at the Peterson Event Center. Pretty impressive showing. Wasn't necessarily the case early in the game, but by the time they got to halftime and even about 6 minutes before halftime, it was clear who was in charge. And I think there's some interesting things to note about this team, how they played, how they were constructed on the court, who stepped up, who led the team, and kind of what we take out of it all going forward. Game 1 of 31 is in the books, and probably more than 31 when you get into the postseason. But game 1 of 31 regular season games is in the books. What do we think about Pitt basketball after last night's win? Let's talk about it here on the Morning Pitt on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. I'm guessing the first comment on this video when it gets posted here on Tuesday morning is going to be thanks. There's that regular guy, our one biggest fan who always just says thanks every morning after the video is posted. I'm guessing the second video is going to be a handful of you guys who say you should be talking about Pitt football. Well, we did a whole lot of that on Saturday night. We did a whole lot of that yesterday. We're going to do a whole lot of that tomorrow on the Morning Pit, and tomorrow night on the live stream, and Thursday on the Morning Pit, and Friday in the Morning Pit mailbag, and then again after the game on Saturday. I mean, we talk about football all the time, and there's a lot to say about football for sure. We're not going to run away from it after they suffer a bad loss, but we are now entering that point in the season where there's a couple sports going on where football and men's basketball are both happening, and so we're going to split our time not evenly, but the day after a game, we're going to talk about that game. And so I think Pitt basketball is relevant to discuss. Panthers hosted Radford last night at the Peterson Event Center. They won by 96-56. Just a blowout. I mean, Pitt was on a roll. They dominated this game pretty much in every way imaginable. They shot 55% from the floor. They out-rebounded Radford. They shot almost about 35% from three. We'll talk about that in a second. Pretty solid 76% free throw shooting. You like to do better than missing 5, but I think the key guys that you would like to see make a lot of three-pointers or free throws, were pretty good in that regard. I mean, there's a lot to dig into with the numbers, a lot to dig into with the who and the how of what happened in last night's game. The long and short of it, well, just the short of it, because we're not going to get into the long of play-by-play of how that game went down last night. But for the first 14 minutes or so, this game was relatively competitive. I mean, Pitt would be up. I think at one point they were up by 7. They were up 17-10 in the first half. Oh, they were up 24-16. So about an 8-point lead after a Cam Corrin dunk on a nice pass from Jalen Lowe. But then Radford was scoring a little bit. Pitt kind of went into a slump, and right around the 6-minute mark, it was a 4-point game. Pitt was up 28-24 after Radford made a couple free throws. Pitt, I think, had made 1 out of 8 field goals to sort of let Radford close the game a little bit, or make the game a little bit closer. And then I don't know if a switch flipped or what it was, but Pitt just took off. They finished the first half on a 17-3 run to go into halftime, up 45-27, an 18-point lead. They eventually pushed that lead to 40. Obviously, by the end, they had it in the 30s. Not too long into the second half, about 5 minutes into the second half, they were up 30. They really just sort of took off. And for the first 14 minutes, you felt like, what's going on here? What's happening? Why is Radford kind of hanging with Pitt? Why is Pitt not putting Radford away? Pitt should be much better than Radford. What's going on? And then it started clicking. And there was a great post from on the message boards from our friend Pitt Chag. Said, oh, maybe this game tonight, this was a post made like yesterday morning, this game tonight, maybe they'll start a little bit slow, but then they'll hit a spot where they just, go on a big run to pretty much put the game away. And that's exactly what happened. I think they started a little bit slow on both ends of the court. They weren't shooting great in the early going, but by the time they got to halftime, they were rolling. Pitt was rolling and in charge and controlling the game. And so much of what happened last night, and this will be the case probably in most of their 31 regular season games and then into the postseason, so much of what happened last night drew from the play of Ishmael Leggett and Jalen Lowe. These two guys are expected to be the man, the men. They're expected to be him for this team, as my kids might say. And we had a fun conversation over the offseason about, whose team is it? Is it Jalen Lowe's team or is it Ishmael Leggett's team? And getting into the semantics of what it means for it to be someone's team. But I think, even if there's disagreement about whose team is it, and for the record, it's Jalen Lowe's team. But even if there's disagreement about whose team it is, I think everyone would agree that these are the two engines for this team. And when this team succeeds, it's going to be a result of these guys playing at a high level. And I think it's reasonable to expect them to be playing at a high level more often than not. And they certainly were last night. Lowe finished with 21. I think that was a career high on 6 of 11 shooting. Made all 7 of his free throws. He had 5 rebounds and 6 assists. 6 assists were the most of any player in the game. And then Leggett had 19. Hit 9 out of 13 shots. Only made 1 3-pointer. He'll do better than that, but he did have a double-double with 12 rebounds, added 3 assists, which works out well for me because when I made my bold prediction on Panther-Lair.com yesterday, we had our real, our season preview content, and one of the things we did was make a bold prediction, and there were some good predictions in there, and mine, I don't know how bold it really was. It was just more of a prediction than a bold prediction, but I predicted that Ishmael Leggett would average 15, 7, and 3. Well, last night he had 19, 12, and 3. So, probably the number I'm most going to be keeping an eye on is that 3 assists per game. And, through one game, he's averaging 3 assists per game. So that's a pretty good place to be. Like Ishmael Leggett is a really fun player to watch because pretty much anything that you can do on a basketball court, there's a decent chance that Ishmael Leggett will do it at some point. Maybe not a monster like windmill dunk or something like that, but like great pass, he'll do that. Tough drive, he'll do that. Pull up and shoot from inside or outside the arc, he'll do that. Get a pass down low and bully his way to the basket, he'll do that. Dribble along the baseline and go up and under or reverse, he'll do that. And then on the defensive end, cutting off the passing lanes, cutting off drives, getting in the passing lanes. I don't think he had a block. Did he have a block shot last night? Yep, he had a block and he had 2 steals. I mean, Ishmael Leggett is a Swiss Army knife of a player who really does everything. And he led Pitt in rebounds last year. There's no reason to think he won't lead them in rebounds this year. Guillermo Diaz-Graham added 9 rebounds. That was the second most on the team behind Leggett's 12. Cam Corrin and Jalen Lowe had had 5 each, and we'll talk about all these guys a little bit more. But, I mean, I still think it's Jalen Lowe's team. I picked him as the MVP for this team, but Ishmael Leggett might be the best overall player on the team this year in terms of what he can do and the variety of things he can do, the versatility of things he can do. Now, anytime I make a statement like that about best this or that on the team, I mean, it all takes into consideration the fact that Amsal Delilich is not playing yet. When he gets back on the court and gets up to speed, I suspect he'll have a pretty big impact. And as we talk about lineups here in a second, he's obviously going to change the way Jeff Capel approaches the lineup. But with the guys they went with last night, the guys they had available, and the players they used, we got certain looks at certain lineups, and we'll get into that in a second. But Ishmael Leggett is just such a versatile player, and he can make so many things happen out of nothing. I mean, he can obviously work in the half court and operate in an offensive set and get to his spots and make plays, but transition baskets, again, sort of, putback, second chance points, like all these sort of, I don't want to call them like dirty, grimy plays or off schedule plays, whatever you want to call it. I mean, Ishmael Leggett lives in a lot of universes. He lives in a lot of dimensions on the basketball court, and there's it sort of feels like a there's nothing he can't do with the basketball. He's sort of Cole Trickle of the Pitt basketball team right now, because that, just based on the variety and the versatility in his game. And it's not just an overreaction to how he played against Radford last night. I mean, it's what he did all year last year too. And it looks like he's going to do it at an even higher level this year as a member of the starting lineup. I mean, like you're not bringing Ishmael Leggett off the bench this year. And that was something that I still was sort of wondering about for a little while, even into the summer. Would they bring him off the bench? You knew Lowe was going to be in the starting lineup. You assumed Cam Corrin was going to be in the starting lineup, and probably Guillermo Diaz-Graham in the starting lineup as the 4. But those other 2 spots, what are you going to do? You're going to play Damian Dunn. Is Delilich going to be in the mix? Is Zach Austin still going to be a starter? How are you going to fit these guys in? Well, Ishmael Leggett's a starter, and probably there's a lot of Pitt fans who are probably thinking like, well, yeah, of course he's going to be a starter. I didn't know if it was an automatic, like a guarantee. Now I'm pretty sure that it is. Now I'm pretty sure that it is an automatic, and he is going to be a starter. He's going to be this team's maybe best player, even if Jalen Lowe ends up being the MVP. Lowe was great last night. Made every took 7 free throws and made every single one of them. Obviously, like I said, the 6 assists, no turnovers, just a really sparkling job from him. Team high 3 steals, added in 5 rebounds, 2 of them on offense. Just a great game from Lowe. For as good as Leggett is going to be this year, I got to think, I'm sure you, like me, are probably really excited to see what Jalen Lowe can do with a full season as the guy. Because even last year, even if he wasn't the guy pretty much at all, I mean, it was always Bub Carrington, it was Blake Hinson. Lowe had a lot of really good games, but he was not the guy. There was still like a period where it took him half the season to really get going. I think he might have been hurt for a little bit, and then just being a freshman. Well, he's hitting the ground running this year, and you see it. And I don't think he's going to have 21, 5, and 6 every night, but he's going to score in double figures every night. He's probably going to have at least a half dozen double-doubles, I would think. Well, maybe not a half dozen. He's probably going to have 3 or 4 double-doubles with points and assists. He looks like he's playing at a really high level. And so this team is going to go where Leggett and Lowe take them. And look, I mean, everybody knows it. I mean, like, if you really want to succeed in college basketball, I mean, like, you could do it if you've got great guards, and it looks like Pitt has 2 great guards, and then some pretty good guards behind them, because Damian Dunn looks like he's going to be a really, really good player for this team. 11 points last night, shot 3 of 6 from the floor, 1 of 2 from 3, made all 4 of his free throws, didn't have any rebounds. He had 1 steal, 2 fouls. He looks physical. He looks smart. He's good on defense. Can do some of the things that Ishmael Leggett can do in terms of getting to the basket and sort of getting those sort of dirty points, those off-schedule points. He does a pretty good job there. Obviously, he can get out and run. I think he's just such a great addition, where such a great addition to this backcourt, where you've got Lowe and Leggett returning. You've got this star freshman coming in, and Brandon Cummings, I think, had a really good game last night. Like, I'm going to get off track here and start talking about Cummings when I still wanted to talk about Damian Dunn. But Brandon Cummings, I thought, looked better last night than he did in the exhibition game against Point Park. The exhibition game against Point Park, he looked a little tentative. He's still finding his way, feeling his way. We saw that he had a pretty decent game against Cincinnati, and I thought he looked better, like I said, last night than he did against Point Park, which is not what you expect to see. He looked a lot more comfortable last night than he did against Point Park. So you have these two returning guards in Lowe and Leggett, and then you bring in this young star who looks like it's going to be every game or every few games he's going to keep improving and be a big piece of this backcourt rotation. He played 24 minutes last night. That's probably not always going to be the norm, but he rotated in the second sub. They subbed in Zach Austin for Damian Dunn at 4 minutes in last night. And then the second sub, just under right around just under 14 minutes, just over 6 minutes into the game, Cummings came in for, ultimately it was for Guillermo Diaz-Graham, but he came in and played as a third guard with Lowe and Leggett. And so early substitution for Brandon Cummings would indicate that he's going to have a role with this team, a prominent role. He just happens to be playing behind two experienced returning guards and one experienced transfer guard. But he's going to play with those guys. I shouldn't say behind, but he's going to play with those guys quite a bit. So it's really, I really like the addition of Dunn to that group of the returning guards and the freshman guard because of what he brings in terms of experience and defense, and just he knows how the game is played, and he knows how to play the game, and he knows how to play it right. And I think you can see from his success at Temple and then the year he spent at Houston, I think you can get a sense of that he knows how to play, and he knows how to play the game right. And he's a big addition, I think, to this team. Lineup-wise, I really just kind of looked at the first half. Let me see how many we had. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So I counted 10 unique lineups in the first half last night. The starting lineup obviously had three guards with Lowe, Dunn, and Leggett. The second sub was Lowe, Leggett, and Cummings. Then they go Dunn, Cummings, and Leggett. Then Lowe, Dunn, and Cummings. And then finally Lowe, Leggett, and Cummings for a couple of rotations, and Lowe, Dunn, and Cummings. So, really kind of mixing and matching with the pairings there. Lowe, Dunn, Leggett, and Cummings, kind of mixing and matching who they put out there. When Lowe wasn't out there, I think Cummings was more or less his backup, although I think it was real brief when they had that lineup on the court. I do think Cummings is probably the backup there, but I think any of these guys can handle the point, can bring the ball up, Lowe, Leggett, Dunn, or Cummings. And then in the front court, you start off with a combination of Guillermo Diaz-Graham and Cam Corrin. Zach Austin plays a little bit of four with Corrin, and then with Guillermo Diaz-Graham, where those were the two forwards, Austin and Corrin, or Austin and Diaz-Graham. Jorge Diaz-Graham got on the court, played in a big lineup, a Lowe, Leggett, Austin, Jorge, Cam Corrin lineup. That was a pretty sizable lineup, and then it got even bigger when they went Lowe, Leggett, Austin, Jorge, and Guillermo on the court at the same time. So you had a real size there, showing a little bit of the versatility of where this lineup can be. But ultimately, I think, and Jim Hammett, our guy, pointed it out, they basically have 8 guys right now with what's available. 8 guys, 8 good players, guys that you'll turn to, with Lowe, Dunn, Leggett, Guillermo, Cam Corrin, Austin, Cummings, and Jorge. And then you have a couple guys behind them. Papa Conte got in. I think he didn't get in until the second half. It was just a little more than 6 minutes into the second half. He got in for a little bit, and it didn't go great. Although I think Conte had some nice plays near the end in the final minutes of the game. He had an and one. He didn't convert, but he had an and one, finished a fast break, and did a nice job there. And so that's sort of your front court depth behind Corrin and Guillermo is Papa Conte. And then, of course, once you bring Amsal Delalic in, it's going to mix these things up a little bit, and we'll see where he fits in. Is it 2 or is it 3? Could he run the point? Could he play the 4 as a shooter 4? I think all of those things are sort of on the table. Moving out from the guards, I would say watching Guillermo Diaz. Well, first of all, as far as Cam Corrin goes, I like what he brings. I like what he does. He scored 12 points last night, had 5 rebounds. Not as much as you would have liked to have seen on the rebounding front. I don't know if their rebounding is going to be much better or worse than it was a year ago as a team. You'd like to think that having Cam Corrin down there would give them more of an advantage, but it didn't really seem to play through last night. But I just look at it as, Cam Corrin is, and I'm not sure anyone would really dispute this, but Cam Corrin's a net positive, a net upgrade over what they had last year with Federico. Federico, just for his ability to finish on offense, whether it's in transition, on a fast break, he can get out and run, and he can finish. He can finish alley-oops. And if he gets the ball down low, he can make a move and go up strong for a chance at a basket. And so, it's an improvement there. It's an upgrade, and I think a nice addition. Elsewhere with the forwards, I couldn't shake the feeling last night that Guillermo Diaz-Graham and Zach Austin are basically who they were a year ago. I think Guillermo's a little bit better, but he just kind of looked like Guillermo from last year, and Zach Austin kind of looked like Zach Austin from last year. Austin played 22 minutes in this game last night, had 3 points, 1 of 3 shooting from the floor. All 3 of his shots were from 3. And then, like, a guy like Zach Austin, his athleticism and what he can do, he had 1 rebound, he had a block, which is good, but with what he can do athletically, it doesn't make a lot of sense to me that all 3 of his shots were 3-pointers. All 3 of his attempts were 3-pointers. Like, I don't know why he wouldn't. I don't know why he's only living out there, at least when it comes to shooting. So we'll see how his game develops, but it sort of felt like Guillermo and Austin were largely who they were a year ago. They're a year older, a year more physically developed, but by and large, kind of the same guys they were. What else stood out? Shooting-wise, they were 8 of 23 from 3. Not great, 34.8%. More notable to me is the 23 attempts. I think that's what you're going to see out of this team. They're going to still shoot quite a bit. Leggett and Lowe attempted 4 each from 3. Guillermo, Brandon Cummings, and Zach Austin attempted 3 each. Damian Dunn had 2 attempts from outside, made 1 of them. Jorge was 1 of 1. Marlon Barnes tried 1 and missed it. Cam Corrin tried 1 and missed it. This was the thing that was notable to me when we kind of evaluated some of the info we were able to get out of the scrimmage against Cincinnati. They shot 11 of 23 from 3. And they had, I think, 7 different players make a 3. So you're seeing this group effort at shooting 3-pointers, which you're going to need in order to make up for the volume you lost when Blake Hinson and Brandon Cummings, when Blake Hinson and Bub Carrington went on to the NBA. You're going to need a group effort, and I think they got it clearly in that scrimmage. They seemed to get it again last night, where I think they had 7 guys again make a 3-pointer. Yeah, Dunn, Leggett, Lowe, Guillermo, Cummings, Jorge, and Zach Austin. They all made, 7 guys made a 3-pointer, basically everybody other than Corrin out of your main 8 players. So that's, I think, what you want to see. I think it's what they're going to need to do. I think they're going to need to have that kind of group effort, that volume-based effort, and still be a threat from outside, because that's the style of play they've developed over the past few years, and they're going to need to carry it over to this season. And then finally, and I'm not sure if it came out before yesterday, but I first noticed it yesterday, this new slogan for the team of "Leave No Doubt." I think that's really, really on point with what this team needs to do and how this team needs to approach things. Obviously, it's a reference to being left out of the NCAA tournament last year. It's a reference to how the team, and I think rightfully so, probably feels like they put themselves in position to be questioned as a tournament-worthy team. Whether it was losing to Mizzou, or some of the. I mean, really, that was the big one that probably makes the difference between making the. That game was probably the difference between making the tournament or not making the tournament. But I think that's why it's important to internalize this message of leave no doubt. Like, don't put it in the selection committee's hands. You know what I mean? Don't put yourself on the bubble. You don't need to be on the bubble. You can avoid the bubble by winning your games, by taking advantage of the opportunities that present themselves to you, and by leaving no doubt. Don't be a question mark. Don't be one of those teams that people are not sure about. Don't be one of those teams with only 50% representation on bracket matrix or something like that. Leave no doubt. And so I think that's I don't always get into when coaches have their slogans and things like that, but I think that's a good one for this team because it's how they should be approaching things. Of leave no doubt. You believe you're good enough to be in the tournament, and I agree with them. I think they are. Well, don't leave it up to the committee. Take it out of their hands by winning and winning your way in. Leave no doubt. I think that's a great slogan by Capel and his staff, and we'll see how the team does with it. So Pitt's 1-0. They got the win over Radford last night, 96-56. They will play again on Saturday. Or no, on Friday night, excuse me. Why don't I know the opponent off the top of my head? How embarrassing is this that I have to look this up? Why wouldn't I just know this? Who they're playing on Friday. Nope, not that. Murray State. There are people out there that are like, are you kidding me? You're an idiot. Of course, they're playing Murray State. You should know this already. I should, but I didn't. So now I do. Yep. Murray State. 7 o'clock at the Peterson Event Center on Friday night. We won't have a show the next day after that because Pitt's got a game the next day. The Panthers will host Virginia football-wise at 8 o'clock p.m. at Acrisure Stadium. We'll be live after that game. Listen, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com so you never miss any of our Pitt video content. These daily morning Pitt videos, our weekly live show that we do every Wednesday night at 8:30 p.m. We'll have that one tomorrow night with me and Jim Hammett. And then our post-game shows. We'll be live after the Virginia game on Saturday night right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. So thanks for tuning in today. I hope your week got off to a great start yesterday. Make sure you get out and vote today. We won't talk about that at all today or tomorrow or any other day. That's my promise to you. That's the peak promise. We will not talk about the election other than to say, get out and vote. Or don't. If you don't want to, don't. It's up to you. You get to choose. The real choice is whether you even go to the poll in the first place. So, good luck with that. All right, enjoy your Tuesday. We will catch up with you tomorrow in the Morning Pit right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com.